Hello, design lovers. I'm Ashley Childers, and I'm really excited today because I am going to take you through a mid-summer tour of my vegetable and flower garden. Now, this space is very precious to me. We just added it last year, and it gave me the opportunity to have raised garden beds and a flower and vegetable garden of my dreams. So I want to take you through step by step on what the space looked like before, our process, and some of the decisions that I made that worked really well for us and a few that didn't. And maybe it can help inspire you to create a garden oasis at your own home. I want to start the garden tour right here at one of our two garden gates. So our new garden in proximity to our house is at the back side of our house, and it flanks either side of our new outdoor patio extension. Some of you may have seen the video that we made on our new outdoor patio. If you haven't, check it out because there's some really beautiful and inspirational elements that we added into that space. So for the garden, I have a portion of the garden that is on the right side of our outdoor patio and then a portion of the garden that is on the left side. So this is the right side, and you enter this actually from our driveway. The entire garden is gated and fenced because we live on acreage, and although deer are beautiful and majestic creatures, they literally will eat just about anything and everything. So over the past 6 years as a gardener, I just got so frustrated because I would plant beautiful roses, they would eat them before they bloom. They would eat all of my hydrangeas, just really anything that's flowering they will eat, and we have about 20 to 30 deer that walk through our property twice a day. So having a fenced garden was a necessity for me if I wanted to not lose my mind and keep my flowers alive. So here we are at the first garden gate, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the design of the fence and the gate. We decided to go with cedar on our fence and gate because it ties in to the shutters that are on our house, and then we had all of it stained this beautiful gray color that also ties into our shutters and window color on our house. That's a little bit of a designer tip for you. If you are adding an outdoor garden area or outdoor extension onto your home, a patio or anything like that, really think through your material selections because it just creates so much more of a cohesive design experience if you use materials and colors that are on your home's exterior. Okay, let's walk into the garden, and I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the hardscape elements and plant material that we used on this side of the garden. Now that we have made it through the garden gate, we are in the main area of the right garden, and I added in 3 raised garden beds on this side and the opposite side of the garden. We actually purchased these raised beds online because they were already pre-made. All we had to do is put them together, and they turned out wonderfully. I'll link them below. And then we just had them stained the color of the shutters and the fence. So that gray color ties in. It really did, that little extra effort of having them stained really made such a big difference aesthetically, and I think it just finished off the raised garden beds perfectly. We also added in pea gravel throughout the entire space, and I really like that we did that. It's beautiful. I love the color. It ties into the raised beds and the shutters and the brick color, but also it's super practical for all of our water, and we, obviously are watering these beds every single day, so it's great for runoff, and then also it is perfect for keeping weed control. So that is a pro tip as well. We actually used, it's not necessarily pea gravel, it looks like pea gravel, but it is a really small version of SB2, which is a granite rock, and because it's not smooth stones, it actually kind of, like, once it's packed down, it packs together in a way that makes it not loose under your feet, and I like that because it's more stable to walk through, and I walk through the garden every single day. So also what we did when I was designing the garden layout, I really took a lot of time to think through the plantings, all of the plant materials, what flowers and plants I wanted in the garden, and then the sight lines throughout each one of the spaces. So on this side of the garden, we have a big arbor that will eventually get covered in climbing jasmine, which I love. We live in Arkansas, and this version of jasmine, although star jasmine, which is the white jasmine, is probably my favorite, it just sometimes does not do well here. If we have a hard freeze, it just dies back. So Carolina jasmine for us in the South is a really great option. It is a great hardy climber. It grows really prolifically, as far as like you get a lot of growth every single year, and it does retain its green leaves all season long and throughout the winter. And I like having that kind of green in the garden throughout the winter months when everything else has died back. I want to talk a little bit more about something that was a non-negotiable for me in the garden, and it was string lights. I had to have them. I think they're beautiful and magical, and we have them on every single night. So when I was planning the arbor and the openings in our outdoor porch patio area, I thought through and made sure that everything lined up perfectly so that I could have string lights running throughout the entire space, and they would be symmetrical. Symmetry is a big thing for me, and I really, if I'm designing something and I have the opportunity to create symmetry, especially in an outdoor space, I do so because the visual interest of symmetry, when you've got all of the wildness of plant materials and things like that, creating symmetry with hardscape is really important, and it just makes the space feel more cohesive. So pro tip there. Another thing that we did when we were thinking through the layout of the entire garden, the perimeter beds run all the way around each side of the garden. So, and then the center area left space for me to have the raised beds. I also left a large area right here in the center that is the width of the steps going up into our outdoor patio. I knew that I wanted to have a space that was open, that I could create seasonal interest with potted plants. Or maybe one day I want to do a fountain or a bird bath or whatever. I needed the space to do that. So this space is probably, I think it's about 8 feet wide, and it gave me the opportunity this season to add a lot of beautiful potted plants. And I love that English garden look, kind of overgrown and abundant, and this creates that feeling for me. When I was thinking through inspiration and gathering inspiration for this space, I looked back at pictures that I had taken in the Cotswolds when I was on a trip a few years ago with my daughter, and I have such a connection to the Cotswolds and to the English garden style. It is absolutely my very favorite style of gardens, and so I wanted to recreate that as best I could here. We live in Arkansas, so some of the plants that are in the Cotswolds, obviously I can't grow here, but I really thought through the style, the layout, the abundance of plant material, and made sure that those things that I'm drawn to in the Cotswolds from the garden design there, I brought those here, and I could experience that same abundance in our garden at home. Another addition to this side of the garden was this sweet little bistro table and chairs. And the reason I put it right here was because this beautiful hydrangea tree, this is a limelight hydrangea tree, and I love it. It provides shade in the morning, in the early morning. The sun rises on the other side of our house, so this casts a shade right here, and I can come out here and have my morning coffee. I often start my day in the garden, and as a part of this whole process of creating this garden and everything, For me, it was about giving myself an opportunity to be creative. I love to garden, and I wanted to create a space for myself that I could come and spend time and do something that I love doing, which is gardening. I am a creative for my job, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you know that I think it's really important to have a creative outlet, especially if you are a creative for your career. Have a creative outlet that is a true hobby for you, and gardening is for me. It centers me at the beginning of every single day. I'm out here in the morning in the early hours when it's somewhat cool. We live in Arkansas, like I said, so the days get really hot in the summer. But in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, when the sun's just starting to rise, it's a really wonderful way to start my day with fresh air and surrounded by plants and flowers. Oftentimes I will, weed, or I'll clip some roses and just start my day in a really beautiful, mindful way. And if you have an opportunity to do that, you love to garden, I would say take time to plan that whole process and give yourself a space, even if it's just a little small side garden, just a space where you can center yourself, have a creative outlet, and bring joy to the summer months. We have moved to the back side of this garden, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the raised beds. So when I was planning these out, I knew that I wanted to make sure that I had seasonal interest and then also a place to grow cut flowers, my roses, and then try my hand at vegetable gardening. So we did one raised bed this year with vegetables. It's doing okay. I'm not a farmer by any means. I was inspired by my grandmother. She was a gardener. Honestly, she's really made me realize my love of gardening as a child. She lived in the Arkansas Delta where you can just about grow anything, and she was very, very talented at gardening. So she always had strawberries and okra, muscadine vines, pecan trees, and then a plethora of beautiful flowers. And I really found my love for gardening there. So this vegetable garden bed is really a tribute to her. She passed away a few years ago, and I miss her terribly. She would love this garden. She would have given me all the tips on how to make all of my vegetables and flowers thrive. But we did some okra, tomatoes, cucumbers, of course, all of the herbs. And honestly, we use the herbs so much. I mean, we use basil almost every day. So I'm glad we have that. And then I've got a couple of little pumpkin vines in there. So hopefully come fall, I'll have some pumpkins growing. I'll let you guys know how that goes. But I just wanted you to see that each one of my raised beds on this side of the garden has a different theme and has different types of plants in them. Some of them are perennials, some of them are annuals. I have some flowering trees. I just wanted to make sure that I had visual interest for every season, and that I also was attracting butterflies in the spring, of course hummingbirds. Those things are really important to us. We love to interact with nature, although maybe not so much the deer. Like I said, we want to keep them out, but turtles and birds and all of the incredible pollinators, we want to attract those throughout the growing season. Before we move to the other side of the patio with the garden over there, I wanted to talk through this area right here and how creating an entrance moment to our patio really made all the difference visually for me. So when we added the outdoor patio, I knew that I wanted to have these cedar columns there's 4 of them flanking each side of the patio. The main reason I wanted the columns was so that I could add wisteria to them. I love wisteria. I think it's beautiful. There's like a connection with me and wisteria from my childhood, and it's something that I wanted to make sure that I added into the garden. I think so many of my memories as a child had something to do with being outside and plants, and that is why I wanted to make sure that I included wisteria, garden roses and hydrangeas in my garden. On each side of the step coming up into the patio, I added pots. Now, as I said earlier, I love that beautiful, like bountiful English garden look, so I wanted it to be very abundant. And I have got probably 35 or 40 potted plants in this garden area. It's a great way to add seasonal color, as you can see, and just gives me the opportunity to try new flowering plants. I tend to lean towards pinks, purples, and whites for my garden. I like a cool garden experience, so I oftentimes don't go for yellows or oranges or reds. That's just a personal preference, but I think if you want that kind of cool summer experience in your garden, opt for cooler tones in your flowers, pinks, purples, and of course whites. I just did kind of a collection of those colors on each side of the steps coming up into the patio area, and I think it creates such a gracious welcome to people who are visiting. So a lot of times, especially in the summer months, if we have friends over to cook out, they will actually come. They don't go into the house necessarily immediately. They'll come through the garden gate and they'll enter right here, and I wanted this to be a really beautiful welcoming space for our visitors and friends. We have walked through the outdoor patio and now are in the left garden. And this garden is really fun and frustrating. This is the garden that when we were away on our trip a few weeks ago, the deer got in here and ate all my roses down, ate my dahlias down. So a little bit of frustration, but everything's growing back up now, and I want to talk to you about the design of this side of the garden. So first of all, we have a very large bracken brown magnolia tree that punctuates this side of the space. And so I had to take that into consideration when I was designing this side of our garden. Also, our kitchen windows are right here. So they look out onto this side. So when I was planning this side of the garden and thinking through what I wanted to be able to see as I'm in my kitchen looking out of the windows, it was a cut flower garden. I absolutely love roses and dahlias and all hydrangeas, anything that I can get my hands on that will do well in the Arkansas heat in the summer and that I can cut and take in and make bouquets out of in our home to add some summer color inside of our home as well. So that was the whole design concept when I was creating this side of the garden. Also, this side gets a lot more direct sunlight throughout the day. It definitely gets over 6 hours. So I was able to include some flowering plants on this side that I couldn't have done on the other side because it doesn't get quite, I mean, it still gets a lot of sun, but not quite as much. So when you're thinking through your garden design, or even if it's just your outdoor patio where you're adding pots, really make sure to watch your sun exposure and how the sun arcs over the space throughout the day, because a lot of times plants will do okay without the exact amount of sun exposure that they need, but they will really thrive if they get the correct sun exposure. In addition to sun exposure, also the watering needs of your plants. That was something that we really had to figure out as we went, because we have a sprinkler system, but when we added this whole outdoor extension to our house and the gardens, I knew that we needed to make sure that we had drip irrigation included in my raised beds. It just gets too hot here in the summer to water these raised beds by hand or with a hose. So although I come out every morning and water all of my potted plants, the raised beds needed an irrigation system. So we added in drip irrigation to all of the beds. So that was something I had to think through ahead of time, because as we were creating this space, we had to make sure that All of the water lines were run in this proper locations. This was a real hands-on project for us. We did outsource some of the labor, but we did a lot of it ourselves. And so sometimes it's nice to do it that way because you save costs, but also you can make sure to be really strategic about your planning and make sure that everything is done properly for your need. Another thing that was paramount for us to consider when I was designing this garden, and something that you should think about when you are adding flower beds or an outdoor garden space to your home, is how large plants will get. And also that plants take time to grow to their full size. That's always difficult for me because I love seeing plants in all of their glory about 3 to 5 years after they've been planted. So sometimes I get a little bit like anxious and I'm ready to see them in their, in their full size. But it's also a learning lesson as a gardener and just as a person that good things take time. And it's the beauty of garden and landscape design, in my opinion, is to watch things grow and flourish and take shape and form into their like adult plant selves. So although sometimes we can be a little impatient, it's also a beautiful kind of journey to watch your landscape or garden unfold and grow from year to year. This year for us, when I had to transplant some things, and so all of my hydrangeas, my limelight hydrangeas at the back, we transplanted them like 3 times last year as we were moving them around trying to get this all designed and constructed. And so they don't look so great this year, but that's just part of it. Next year I will cut them back. They'll be even and they will flourish and they will love their new home for sure. But this year they took a little bit of a hit. Another thing that took a hit was my Alice Oakleaf hydrangeas. I added about, I think it was like 25 or 30 of them up the driveway onto our property, and thinking, I don't know what I was thinking. I suppose that the deer were just gonna steer clear of them. No, they literally ate them down to just little stems this year while we were on vacation. So in my horror, I came back and had every single one of them transplanted back here. So we have like another 25 Alice Oakleaf hydrangeas back here that look kind of leggy, but they're growing back, and they were just sticks about a month ago. So I'm just happy they have leaves on them. So that's another thing to think about when you are planning your garden and your landscape in general, especially if it's not fenced. All of the little critters around your property, you may live in a neighborhood and you don't have deer walking through, but there's always something that will get into your garden. Sometimes it's great, like pollinators, and sometimes it's a total nuisance like deer and they eat all of your plants. So think through that as you are designing your space as well. I hope that you enjoyed our midsummer garden tour. Now, as I said earlier, we planted most of these plants late fall of last year and early spring of this year. So they are not fully grown. This is like my garden in its infancy, but I hope that showing you the beginning stages and what the space looked like before inspires you to create something really beautiful for yourself. Now, if you have any questions or comments about today's video, drop them below and let me know what part of my garden was your very favorite on the tour. Now, if you want even more design inspiration right now, you're going to want to watch this playlist next. And if you want a little sneak peek into my daily design adventures, follow us along on Instagram and Threads now at Ashley Childers Home. As always, I'm Ashley Childers. Thank you for watching, and remember, good design is for everyone. So create a home that inspires you, have fun spending time in your outdoor space this season, and fall in love with where you live one room at a time.